Now, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's information session regarding the application to amend the City of Ottawa's official plan at 1104 Halton Terrace. This meeting is being hosted by the Councillor's Office. Before we begin, we would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage au peuple et au territoire de la nation Anishinaabe algonquine. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage à toute la Première Nation, à tous les Inuits et à tous les Métis, de même qu'aux précieuses contributions passées et présentes à cette thème. Tonight's meeting will proceed as follows. We begin with opening remarks from your ward councillor, Councillor Curry. Then we will turn to a presentation from the applicant. The presentation will be led by Christine McCuaig from Q9 Planning and Design. She's joined by her colleagues, Anthony Bruni, Mark Bissett, Ryan James, Brad Byvelds, and by their client, Brian Saumure of Maple Leaf Homes. Following the presentation, the floor will open to questions from the public. Individuals wishing to ask a question may use the raise hand function or submit a question in the chat to me. Once queued, you will be prompted to unmute yourself and given 5 minutes to formulate and ask a question. Once you have the floor, you will be given that time to comment and ask all of your questions. This is intended to minimize interruptions and back and forth over Zoom. I'll notify you at 1 minute. You can also ask questions through the comment section, which will be monitored throughout the meeting and asked intermittently. So I'll pass it over to Councillor Curry right now.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Thank you everyone for being here. I've got just a couple of things to say. First of all, that I really appreciate the developers coming to speak to the community. It's a new world in the planning world where the planners used to come on at the same time and speak to the community. But today what we have is the developers alone. But I will tell you that, as Andrew said, this is being recorded. So the planner on the file, who I believe is Stream Shen, is that the planner for this, Andrew?
Kieran Watson.
Oh, Kieran Watson. Sorry, we have Stream Shen for the one right around the corner. I just got them mixed up. And Andrew will put in the chat the email address for the planner so that if you want to send in written comments afterwards as well. But know that Andrew is not only recording this for the planners to watch, but recording it for the community to watch. Because I know a lot of community members had said, I can't necessarily make every one of the evenings on consultation evenings, but if you send the link out in your newsletter, I can watch the recording. So know that there'll be a lot more people watching the recording at some point in the future. And Andrew will be taking notes in terms of any comments that you have about the development. But I really appreciate everyone's time here tonight to look at what a future plan might be for 1104 Halton Terrace. As you know, this area is developing rapidly and significantly, and this is one of the many developments to come. So I will leave it at that and encourage you to get your feedback in now and in the future, and turn it over to the developers to present what they would like to propose.
Thanks, Councillor Curry. So my name is Christine McCuaig, planner, land use planning consultant with Q9 Planning and Design. And here with us tonight for our team is Anthony Bruni, the architect on this file, Mark Bissett, the civil engineer, Ryan James, the landscape architect, Brad Byvelds for traffic, and the client is also online tonight, Brian Saumure from Maple Leaf Custom Homes. I have a presentation that I'll share, and then following the presentation, as Andrew said, we'll get into sort of the comment and response, and we're all available to answer questions that you may have. So share my screen. All right, Andrew, you want to give me a thumbs up? We're good?
Looks good.
Perfect. Just gonna try and get this out of my way. Perfect. So as Councillor Curry said, this is for 1104 Halton Terrace. And of course, nope. So this is where the subject site is located. It's at the north portion of Kanata. Has frontage on Halton Terrace as well as Old Carp Road. And the outline of the property that's noted in yellow doesn't quite address the exact outline of the proposed development. It does address the outline of the lands owned by Maple Leaf Custom Homes. But if you can see my cursor on the screen, the existing homes along Halton Terrace that are near to the development, there are additional lots that are being proposed that will not part of these applications, but just generally to continue that single detached context along Halton Terrace, just in that sort of bottom corner towards Halton Terrace. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of where this application is at, because it has taken a bit to get here, and we did submit these applications under sort of the old rules in terms of the planning process. So the zoning amendment and the site plan control applications were submitted in 2021. There were some discussions about some revisions to the project, and then we were able to provide an updated application at the tail end of 2023. As part of that revision, we also submitted an official plan amendment at the early part of this year, 2024. And I'll walk you through exactly what those applications mean and what they are as we go through the presentation. But essentially, the applications are submitted, and right now everything is in a stage of review. So the applications are being circulated with the City of Ottawa. That's what's kind of ongoing and happening right now. And we're also having our public consultation, because as the City of Ottawa is circulating and providing their comments, we also wanted to connect with the public and obtain your comments and your concerns and respond to your questions as part of the sort of entire circulation that we want to do. Following all of the comment and responses, both from public and staff, the application gets refined and finalized, and the zoning and official plan amendment portions of the application would then go to Planning and Housing Committee, where there is a second opportunity for people to provide comment, either written or verbal. And following Planning and Housing Committee, where staff would make a recommendation, following that it would go to City Council. And once the zoning amendment and official plan amendment processes are complete, the site plan process, which is more the fine-grained detail of the approval, would carry forward that portion in time. And as Andrew mentioned, the planner on file at the city is Kieran Watson. My expectation is they will still be the planner when this is going through the more refined site plan portion. And they will still take, comments or questions from people if there are questions, following the official commenting period that results from the zoning amendment and official plan amendment processes. So that's where we're at. And the asks as part of these applications, for the zoning amendment portion, the site is currently zoned R3, and we're proposing an apartment building that is partly low-rise and partly mid-rise, with the 5th story on the portion of the building. And so in order to allow that type of building being proposed, the apartment portion, we need to rezone to an R5 zone. So the R5 will allow us to have that 5th story, and it permits the use that we are seeking. The official plan amendment is specifically to allow only that 5th story. So 4 stories are already permitted for this site in the official plan. And so the only ask for the OPA is simply that 5th story. And I'll get into why we've, developed and brought the mass to that point and why that is part of the ask. And then the other part of the ask is related to the zoning amendment, and that is simply to reduce the resident parking rate to 1 space per unit. This aligns with a lot of general provincial direction, trying to limit how many vehicles are per person or per unit, just in terms of a lot of sustainability considerations. We're really trying to emphasize either shared modes of transportation or active transportation, as well as public transportation. And as part of that ask, we've made sure to include what's referred to as transportation demand management measures to further support that reduction in the number of parking spaces. And we'll get into that a little bit more as well. So those are the asks: to take it from a current R3 zoning to an R5 zoning, to allow the apartment building, and to allow that 5th story. The 5th story ask also requires that OPA component. And then the last component is the 1 space for parking, or 1 space per unit parking rate. So this is the proposed site plan, a colored version of the proposed site plan. You can see here is the 4-story component of the building, which we've positioned towards the existing low-rise community. And then the 5-story portion of the building that is positioned towards the corner that will be, visible from March Road, where high-rise development is, planned and permitted. The total number of units that are being proposed as part of this application is 103. There will be 103 resident parking spaces and then an additional 21 visitor parking spaces. As you can see, there are parking spaces that's at grade, just sort of towards the bottom of the page there. There's a courtyard that is being located interior to the building mass. And then below grade, there is parking spaces below grade as well. The reason why all of the parking isn't below grade is that there are considerations with bedrock and development of the site. And this is an appropriate balance to make sure that you're not excavating too much of the site more than necessary, especially when there's bedrock considerations, because going deeper into bedrock obviously has cost implications. And, the general desire is to have housing that is ultimately, we don't want to place excess costs on housing simply because we wanted to excavate deeper for, more parking when we can position parking on the site in a surface capacity and buffer it with trees and landscaping around. We are also proposing 72 bicycle parking spaces as part of the proposed development. So I'll just give you a minute to sort of look at the site plan before I jump on to the next slide, because we're going to get into a little bit more of the 3Ds and the renders of the proposed development. So this just sort of shows the proposed buildings in context. So you can see towards the bottom of the site where it fronts onto Halton Terrace, there's single detached lots that are being continued along the existing context. And then the development that is part of this application is closer to the corner. There are accesses from both Halton Terrace and Old Carp Road. The access from Halton Terrace provides access to the surface parking, and the access from Old Carp provides access to the below grade parking garage. So these are some images of the proposed design. So the top left image shows you the interior courtyard space that's being developed. The bottom left is sort of an aerial bird's eye view. And in that particular image, you can see the 4-story portion on that bottom right corner. Because of the grading of this particular site, if you notice just in counting the windows, it does actually present as 3 stories because of the grading. So that was really a unique opportunity into how this massing of this building was developed. And we'll get into that a bit further. The top right image is the view from the corner of Halton Terrace and Old Carp. And then the bottom view is the image sort of coming into the parking lot there. So as I was stating, there's, when you're looking at how to develop a site, we have to consider the massing that's allowed and then how to best represent that on the site. Of course, we are aware of the existing low-rise residential context, and we wanted to shape the building in such a way that, we still get the density that, is ideally suited for this development close to March Road and close to a corner site, but in a way that, least impacts the existing community towards the low rise. And we wanted to have a bit of a transition in height because you are going to be stepping up in height as you move towards March Road. And so it made sense to sort of carve out the permitted density for this particular site and reorient it in a way that it provides that height transition, which you can see in sort of slide 3, where we've taken sort of that permitted density and reoriented on the site. Other options would be to, push some of the built form closer in this direction, towards the existing dwellings. But obviously that was seen as less favorable. And because of the grading, that additional 5th story from this perspective of the existing low rise actually presents as 4 stories. And the 4th story actually presents as 3 stories. So it was a really unique opportunity to provide the permitted density in a sculpted way that really to us, addressed the most appropriate transition towards the existing community. And so this is just a representation of how that transition of height that's permitted is sort of seen in a general sense. So you've got your low rise of the existing community, and then the high rise that's permitted in the OPA or in the official plan along March Road. And so it made sense for the site as it progresses towards March Road to allow that sort of step in the building design. This view is taken sort of between the existing development and behind the existing singles on Halton Terrace. So you can see, just looking at that grade and the number of rows of windows that you see, that it does present as 3 stories and 4 stories as opposed to presenting as 4 and 5. So it was a really interesting opportunity to reorient the massing in a way that was least impactful. This is another view, just sort of showing that height transition from medium rise to low rise across the site and towards the existing dwellings, as well as the proposed singles. So just to give you a brief overview of the supporting studies that were submitted as part of these applications, the infrastructure being, water capacity and sewage capacity, all that, it does have sufficient capacity to support the proposal. And with regards to the reduced parking rate, the proximity of March Road and the proposed transportation demand management measures, which are such things as providing, a preloaded OC Transco card for a certain amount, or, making sure that the residents have access to the maps and the transit routes and transit times. There's a variety of things that can be done in order to support and encourage other modes of transportation other than the single occupant vehicle. So all of these things together ensures that reduced parking rate will not negatively impact the community, and they're seen as supporting the direction that we want to go in from a provincial policy and community standpoint. Drainage from the site will be sent to Morgan's Grant Stormwater Facility for treatment and flow control, and there is extensive landscaping being provided, as well as really detailed and incorporated amenity spaces as part of the site. And from a policy perspective, which is the more of the boring part of things, we've reviewed the proposed applications against provincial policy, and everything is consistent with the direction for provincial policy in Ontario. So I'm going to stop there because I don't want to get into a crazy amount of detail beyond, our asks and what the project looks like and those types of basic details, because we do want to hear from you. We want to know, what main concerns, what questions, what clarifications you need. So I'll stop sharing at this point. And I guess we'll sort of jump into things, and then, depending on the type of question, I can refer to the various team members and pull something back up on the screen as we need to. So thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and hopefully we can answer your questions. And just generally our goal tonight is to hear from you and get your thoughts on the proposal. So thank you.
Thanks, Christine. That was a great presentation. So yes, let's open it up to questions. As mentioned, or for those of you who are just joining us now, you can use the raise hand function to ask a question, or you can submit them through the chat. Those of you who wish to ask questions orally will be given 5 minutes to do so, and will be prompted to unmute once you do. Yeah, okay, I see your, you don't, yes. So Dave Van Dusen, you could receive a prompt here to unmute.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for the invite. Appreciate that. I'm the homeowner on the right directly across the street from the proposed driveway into the apartment building. I'm right beside the park. Lived there since 2010. It was purchased from Minto, and it was a dead end street at the time, and I wasn't aware that they were going to be putting the roadway through, but anyways, back then, 2010, the zoning was R3, which was for multi-residential, but primarily I was told and assumed condos and garden homes, that type of thing, and private dwellings. Anyways, I do have concerns, and you know, it's inevitable that there's going to be development in that area. Get it for sure. But I don't think any traffic studies were done or properly done, and I'll tell you why. I work out of my house at times, most times, walking my dog back and forth. I see what's going on all the time, who's around. I've never seen any traffic studies whatsoever. No traffic counts with the cord over the road and that type of stuff. It's a major thoroughfare, and the 5-story, 105-unit proposed building, which is now 20% higher than what your original 4-story application was approved. It's going to create a lot of traffic issues, a lot of traffic woes. I'm not going to have parking now in front of my house for my daughters who periodically live at home with their vehicles, thanks to a sidewalk that cuts off my driveway. Major concerns with that. And as we all know, great about trying to get people to have one vehicle households these days. Reality is, ain't going to happen. And there's going to be a lot of people vying for parking spots on that street, and we're going to be paying the price for that with no parking. Many of us have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into their house and properties. Property values are going to drop on that, and let's be realistic, they will. I know that for a fact, and I'm concerned about the dwelling. Is this a geared to income building? First of all, it's one of my questions. And if so, there's going to be high turnover in that tenancy. And in geared to income, there's going to be potential vandalism, crime, garbage issues, and on and on and on. Not that I'm here to be so negative. You know, I welcome the new building into the neighborhood. It's inevitable, it's going to be built, but concerns like that, and that's basically really what I wanted to say. So one space per unit, you know, I mean, are there 1 and 2 bedrooms or just 1 bedrooms? Because if there's 2, everyone's got a vehicle. Let's face it, the transportation system isn't where it should be and won't be for a while. Realistically, people will have vehicles and no place to park. They're going to park in the street, and it's going to be a nightmare. It gets extremely busy. It's a major thoroughfare to March Road from all areas in Morgan's Grant, and traffic will be backed up like it is now at times during the morning and late afternoon rush hours. That's basically it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I'll let you go from here, Christine.
Thanks, Dave. So generally, I'm getting a sense that the majority of your concerns are centered around traffic and about sort of the methodology of how a traffic report was conducted. So I am going to bring on our traffic consultant, Brad, to speak to that. And then there was a couple of other questions, but I'll get to those sort of after I allow Brad the chance to speak about the traffic study and how that's done. And he can also speak to some of your concerns about the concern about traffic related to the proposed development. Oh, sorry, Brad. I accidentally muted you.
That's okay. So yeah, there is a traffic study that we had prepared in support of the proposed development. It is available on the city's website on the development application search tool. So when we write our traffic reports, we do have to follow the city's traffic impact assessment guidelines, which is it's kind of a bit of a rigorous process with the city where there's 3 or 4 stages of step through where we go through kind of a review of existing conditions to trip generation and scoping the report, and then the final report itself. So we do have a report that has been prepared in accordance with the city's guidelines. A site of this nature, about 100 units, there is certain thresholds that the city has identified in the traffic impact assessment guidelines that would require a comprehensive study of the signalized intersections within, a 400-meter radius or a kilometer radius, depending on where you are in the city. This site, the trip generation from it is below the threshold for requiring intersection capacity analysis. Therefore, it's more of an assessment of the on-site design and the development impacts at the accesses. So that's what the traffic impact assessment has focused on primarily. But in general, the traffic volumes along Halton Terrace are within acceptable thresholds for a collector roadway, and the development is not anticipated to exceed those capacities. The reduction in parking, I understand, is another part of your concerns. So we touch base, as Christine mentioned, on transportation demand management measures to help alleviate that impact on the adjacent community. So in order to help offset the impact of these apartment or the need for parking, the developer has agreed to providing things such as transit route maps and local walking maps in the front entrances, Presto cards to residents upon move-in preloaded with a certain amount of budget for them to start using transit and kind of get their feet wet using alternative modes. They're proposing excess bicycle parking spaces over and above what the zoning requires. There'll be an on-site coordinator to help with travel related behaviors and to talk to people within the building to kind of organize, coordinate travel to and from. He's also identified the option for having virtue car on site or car share services, I guess, so that'd be a designated space within the lot that would be reserved to the car share service, and people can borrow the car as needed for trips. So there's lots of different things that they are considering to help alleviate that impact on the parking demand. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks.
So the city also will review the traffic report that was submitted and the transportation demand management measures that are being proposed, and they will provide comment back to us as well. I just also wanted to respond to a couple of the other questions you had asked in your comments, and there will be 2-bedroom units in addition to 1-bedroom units. There is no affordable housing proposed as part of this particular application, so I did want to comment on that. And then I'm just to check. I think I've addressed or responded to the items of concern that have come up. But I do want to say that, this is kind of the start of the process in a sense, because it is on circulation with staff. And we do have sort of an open communication with the counselor's office. So if there are additional comments as this application progresses, we certainly encourage everyone to, reconnect with the counselor, and we can give them regular updates as to where we're at and how the process is moving along through the city's process. And as there are, revised versions of site plan and other things, they are uploaded onto the Dev App site as well. So, you can keep an eye on that and you'll see the updates there too. So thank you.
Thank you. I see you, Lucas, but there was a question submitted in the chat by Hoy Nugan. So 3 questions. One, will the parking rules be changed along Halton Terrace? Expresses the same concerns about parking and traffic on street. 2, who's the target customer market for this development? And 3, are there other similar developments planned along Halton, Old Carp, and along March Road? Yeah, I'll let you go there, Christine.
So, I mean, there are other general, there's going to be development in the area. I won't sort of speak to other development applications that may or may not be coming in. We don't know the details. We don't know how they'll change. We can really only speak to the policy context that exists here. The policy context that exists in this particular area is that high-rise is going to be permitted along March Road, and that sort of along the edges of March Road is where mid-rise is appropriate, such as this particular site, which is really only separated from March Road just by the stormwater management pond. And sort of your low rise will continue into the neighborhood where 4 stories is permitted and 2 and 3 stories is generally desired as the minimum. So just in terms of the new official plan. So there's that component of it. And to my knowledge, and sort of Brad can kind of turn his camera on and say yes or no, but there is no proposed changes to on-street parking on Halton Terrace. He's shaking his head no, so good there. And then I'm going to invite Brian Saumure, the owner, to come on and just sort of, comment on the target market for the proposed development.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Hopefully I'm unmuted. Okay, great. I just want to mention one thing about the morphology of the site, or the way the entrances are designed on the site. The idea of the entrance being on the, thanks, Kristen. So you can see where the arrows are. The idea is that we assume most of the traffic coming from the surface parking is going to travel towards Old Carp to get to March Road. So March Road is going to be widened at some point. It's on as part of city policy. So you can see the one entry coming from Old Carp. Old Carp is going to be widened. So the idea is that we're hoping the majority of this traffic, and I assume it will be, wanting to go to the main road, which is going to be March Road, and it will avoid heading into the residential parks. The parking issue I understand, but the idea of all these other, virtue parking and bicycle and more transit, these are the things we're trying to do to encourage people to stay within their parking range. I assume there may be other ways to solve having excessive parking on the street, but I just wanted to mention that the idea of where this traffic is going to flow, it should not be flowing through the residential on Halton. I'm assuming it's going to flow through Old Carp onto March, the majority of it. This is going to be a very nice building, designed by Colizza architects, who are, one of the top firms in Ottawa, and they're really creative. So our target audience here is to have a higher end rental clientele that wants to live in a highly designed building. Maple Leaf is a design firm. We focus on design, we focus on architecture. So the quality of the building and the architectural aspect is really important to us, and that's one of the reasons we went with Colizza, because we feel they're one of the best in the city and in Ontario for this. And so, yeah, it's not an affordable housing building, but it's an architectural piece. So, the confluence of the roads of Halton Terrace and Old Carp, that's sort of a gateway coming into this community. So we want to present that corner as something special in terms of architectural built form. And we think this building and this design does achieve that.
Great, thank you. And also for Hoy, you can email Councillor Curry's office, and we can provide you a list of all the developments, the current development applications in the neighborhood. Lucas.
Side note, Andrew, before you jump on, with regards to other development applications, I know it's a little bit strange because some might be in the queue of the phased process and not on DevApps yet. But if you do go on DevApps, and there are some that are already submitted, if you just click the map view, it is quite easy on DevApps, if you change it to map view, to see what applications are active in your area. Sorry, that was a really city planner comment, but I figured I'd throw it in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's yeah. So I'll pass it over to Lucas and then Steve. So Lucas.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have a few questions. First off, I was wondering, I apologize if it was mentioned I came late to this meeting, but is this development gonna meet like with the how is their intention with like the high lead standard for environmental sustainability for the building? What's the intention for that on that angle? And also another thing, I apologize if it was mentioned, is will there be any accessible units in this proposed building for people with mobility issues, or some of that with wide doors, accessible like kitchens and bathroom and stuff like that? Is what is the plan? Do you think it's going to be a long time, assumingly about the process for when it might start to be built, this building?
All right, thank you, Lucas. I'm going to turn those questions over to the architect, Anthony Bruni, to comment on the sustainability features that are, part of the building. And then on the accessible unit component, I'll let him sort of speak to those comments. And then I can address the timeline thing a little bit afterwards.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me? Thanks for those questions, Lucas. Yeah, the building will be achieving, I believe we're targeting somewhere in the order of 25% better than a code building in terms of energy usage and savings. We're doing that with a tight envelope and with additional insulation on the exterior of the building, so exceeding the R values, better windows, more airtight, and then high efficiency heat pumps and energy usage. So this is a sustainable. This does achieve sustainable targets that are beyond a standard building code building. The barrier-free aspect of it is, yeah, we achieve 15% barrier-free units. So, and that's not fully barrier-free. Fully barrier-free is dedicated to really only someone who has limitations can use it. So these are designed in a way that if you don't have accessibility needs, you could still use the building, but the washrooms are larger. You can have wheelchair turning radiuses in them. You have wheelchair turning radiuses from, in bedrooms and outside the bedrooms, and there's a series of requirements that we meet. So these can be adaptable. And generally the whole building will be barrier-free, accessible from unit to unit, from entrance to every unit, to the garbage room, to everything. So it'd be fully barrier-free. The construction timeline, I don't have that Brian would have to answer that if he has an idea of that yet. Did that cover the questions?
Yeah, I pretty much, and just one thing quickly, is the shadow casting over the existing residential going to be significant, or is it very minimal?
No, by the positioning of the building and where it's located, I mean, the height has no impact on shadowing of the existing houses. So that's important to note. We did do shadow studies, year-round shadow studies, and the shadows of the building will be going onto the road and towards Old Carp Road. That's the majority of the shadows because we are on the more northern portion of the site. So if you notice that the building is designed around a courtyard that faces the south, so it's receives a lot of natural light, and that's beneficial to the building, to the owners, or to the tenants, and the shadows then would be cast north towards basically towards where there's no houses and stuff. So the shadow impact generally stays away from it, and and we did a study showing basically with you know, a 4-story versus a 5-story, and the impact and change on shadows is extremely minimal. It's very doesn't change much. So just by nature of where the building is positioned and how it's sited, there's very little impact, or actually almost no impact on any of the existing homes.
Thanks, Anthony. Oh, I am still unmuted. Perfect. I just wanted to comment on the timeline, and I know Brian can speak to the construction timeline, but the biggest component of the timeline factor right now to get to construction is how the process moves through the City of Ottawa approvals. We're in a bit of an odd transition. There have been updates, you know, from provincial legislation that is trying to, you know, ensure that projects are moving through the process a bit faster than they have in the past. That said, you know, there still is that time for circulation within the City of Ottawa. So, I mean, hopefully we'd be getting to Planning and Housing Committee, you know, within a couple of months, if not sooner. But again, that timeline is very difficult to predict at this point. The city is burdened by a lot of different things right now. The new zoning bylaw is one of those items. And, you know, we'll make sure that we, you know, keep people informed through the councillor's office as to how this is progressing. And then whenever this item does end up on a Planning and Housing Committee agenda, I'm quite positive that, you know, Councillor Curry will make sure that the residents are notified. And then in terms of the actual construction timeline, I don't know, Brian, if you want to comment on once that starts, generally what people might expect.
Yeah, there I am. Yeah, we would assume for a building like this, construction timeline of about 18 months from beginning to end. So when that happens is, again, going to depend on planning, but in terms of actual shovel in the ground, I would assume that about that timeline.
And just to add on to that, I mean, after Planning and Housing Committee, it still needs to, you know, move through the final stages of site plan control. And even once you get site plan approval, behind the scenes, so after approvals are in place for whatever the ultimate development looks like, there is a legal process that follows that can also be a bit time consuming. So, you know, like I said, we'll make sure that we provide updates to the councillor's office so that everyone's aware of where things are at. It is generally hard to predict timelines currently in the world of planning. So we'll just make sure to provide updates.
Yeah, I could mention that the single family homes along Halton, we do intend hopefully to build those prior to the building.
Perfect. Steve Barlow, you're up next.
Okay. Thank you, Christine, for the nice presentation and company. There's a couple of things I'll mention about sort of observations. Overall, I think you've got a nice design of a building there that fits in nicely with the existing community. And the height is nice to see that it's not overly tall, by my opinion. I'm a little curious to know why you might not have considered, I don't know what the differences are really about whether the building you would have chosen to go with a condo building as opposed to an apartment building. The reason I ask that is because I lived in a condo down at Bayshore for a number of years, and it had a rooftop that when I saw your diagrams there, it reminded me of where I used to live. And the rooftop was absolutely gorgeous for the view. You could see all the way to the downtown area, all the way to the West End. And that was 12 stories. But what you've got there at 5 stories in Kanata, with the elevations that this part of Kanata has, you're going to be able to see all the way over the river, over to Gatineau, and it's going to be a beautiful view. And I'm thinking that as Mr. Van Dusen pointed out, where he lives across the road, it's for years, it's always been a very nice, peaceful, quiet area. And then now with the development that's ultimately going to come, regardless of what anybody says, we all know it's coming. And this phasing up from going to low rise to mid rise to high rise up towards March Road and to the other side, it strikes me that that building is going to have a stunning view of the pond right across the road from it, and a beautiful view across to the other side and looking up into the, Gatineau and Aylmer and up that way. So it strikes me that it would be a beautiful condo building, which would reduce the turnover that Mr. Van Dusen was mentioning about, that you get with apartment buildings. I think generally people assume they would have underground parking and so on in a condo, but I'm pleased to see that you're not planning on digging into this beautiful rock that we've got all over the community, or this whole area. It's just beautiful stone everywhere, and everywhere I look, it's just getting blasted to smithereens to build foundations for things. And I wish if we had to build, we could just build on top of it or around it rather than into it. That being said, so that's my comment on the building itself. And the other thing that I would mention is about the traffic flow, is that I travel these areas quite regularly, and I think somebody mentioned that going down to March Road would be the main way to get out of the area to go wherever you're going. I mean, unless you're going out to Carp or Constance Bay to go swimming at the beach or something, you're going to be going down March Road. But more and more, and you folks with this building, depending on the timeline of it being built compared to the big project across the road on March Road, you could well end up being the tip of the iceberg on a huge change in traffic flow. Because what's going to happen, I'm just looking at my bicycle map here, and if I were down at that intersection, and I've been there many times, and I wanted to go shopping, I'm not going to go down March Road. I'm going to go down Old Carp, down to Second Line, and then on to Terry Fox, and all the way down to Campo and to the Centrum Plaza. So there's going to be a ton of traffic, starting with you folks or whoever builds first, but everybody coming out of the new subdivision, the big subdivision on the other side of March Road, because there's not enough commercial enterprises yet in.
30 seconds, Steve.
Okay, go ahead.
No, for you, 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Anyway, that traffic is gonna ultimately go bombing down Old Carp and Old Second Line, and it's gonna turn it from, a couple of hundred cars a day to probably a couple of thousand cars a day almost overnight as soon as these buildings get going. So I just wanted to make those comments and see if you have anything to mention about that. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Stephen. I don't know if we need to revisit the traffic discussion. I do think Brad has addressed that, and we do have the traffic report that was conducted, and staff will be reviewing it. So I don't want to have any repetition, and I want to focus on new comments. So one of your comments was, why was the decision to pursue rentals instead of condo? I mean, I'll let Brian add on to what I'm going to say, but generally the desire from sort of a planning perspective and a provincial perspective is that we want to see more rental than we do condo. It's generally it's easier for someone to rent at this time that we're at than it is for someone to buy a condo. And then there are considerations for a lot of people in the market that when they do buy a condo, there's condo fees that are a little bit less regulated. And so, rental's very important to have, and it can be a great addition to a community. And, it's generally, from a planning policy direction, we do need to see a bit more rental in our communities. So there's support for that. And then Brian, I don't know if you wanted to add anything onto, that particular discussion.
Yeah, rentals, it's market driven. The discussion between rentals and condos. I think what we're seeing in our society as a whole is that there's going to be more rentals. There's just more fluidity in the way people live and work. You assume people that are going to live here wouldn't be, you know, they're getting their first job, maybe in the high tech park. So this is a set fee. It's not going to increase. Condo fees aren't going to change. They know what they're paying for their rent, and they know what they're going to pay every year for however long they're there. And you're also not tied to that particular asset. So it's just a different lifestyle that seems to be the way our society is moving.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. There was a chat question here for you, Christine.
For some reason, I can't see the chat questions, so
Well,
I'll let.
they're submitted to me.
Okay.
That's why. Yeah. Is it normal for an OPA application to take place after an OP has been approved or recently approved?
Interestingly, there used to be in older planning legislation, there used to have to be a little bit of a time period between when an official plan was put in place and before any new OPAs were proposed. I believe the timeline was, 12 months to like 1 to 2 years. I can't recall off the top of my head, but that was actually one of the changes that Ontario, that legislation that came in that was changed, and they're allowing OPAs to, even if there has been a recent OP. And this is to understand, and we've had these issues in the past, is that when an official plan is done, it's a large policy direction document for the whole city. And it's impossible for, even though there's a lot of people working on such a large policy document, it's impossible for them to understand and appreciate and look at the nuances that are particular to every individual site. Every individual site has its own particular context and may have its own particular challenges, and there might be a different massing that really fits that particular site. And so we needed to recognize from a planning policy perspective that in certain instances, an OPA, in this particular instance, it's not a major OPA ask, it's one additional story on a part of the building. So we wanted to, I think, a lot of the reason why the province made those changes is that there needs to be an appreciation for this ever-changing climate of housing issues and just how our world is changing so rapidly, and how developments and communities are changing rapidly, and being able to pivot and being able to recognize that every site has its own particular context and challenges, and to allow that flexibility. It doesn't mean that asking for this doesn't still have to go through the full review process. It does. It's just, you can still now go through that process, and it is still subject to review by city staff and everyone on their teams. It's still, we're going to get comments from traffic at the city's department, and all of those things are still looked at.
Perfect. That was great. Thank you. Neville and then Joanna. Go ahead, Neville. We can't hear you. Your audio is not connected. If you want, you can put it in the chat to me, and then I'll ask it after we go to Joanna. Can anybody hear Neville? No, it's not me. Okay. Okay, Neville, if you want, send it to me in the chat, and then I will ask it. We'll go to Joanna for now.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. Yeah. I'm the house owner just along Halton Terrace. It's not very far from the site. As my neighbor, as people in this group had mentioned before, the place is very nice spot. The site gonna be built is from my observation, the site is built on the rock shield. That gets me really, really concerned about blasting. because in the Facebook group, we have seen people live down on Terror Fox there are house owners have suffered from the blasting because of their foundation get cracked. So they have hired engineers to review and saying it's due to blasting. So that got me really worried about this because if they're gonna be blasting for like a five storage apartment building, that would be more significant than building a house, right? So I know like some house owners has been suffered from, to dealing with insurance or like to prove all that, all this, it's a very stressful period for house owners. I'm just wondering, like, for if this project get approved and move forward, will the city get hold on the developer accountable if there is any damage or due to the blasting that caused loss or anything to the house owners living around the neighborhood? I feel like it's not fair for existing house owners to struggle between, day-to-day stress, and also on top of that is foundation damage. That would be a big cost, and that would be my concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you.
Brian, are you still on? I feel like you have the construction experience to comment on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Joanna. I mean, that's I'm assuming on this site there won't be any blasting. Part of the reason for the design decision that was made was to avoid as much as possible getting into the rock. Hence, we have that surface parking at the back, which is where more of the rock is on this particular site, and then it drops off towards the intersection of Old Carp and Halton Terrace. I can't say exactly whether there would be or not because I don't have finalized grading plans to know what the quantity of that rock is that will likely be encountered, but the idea of how the site was developed was to avoid as much as possible the rock formation. So generally when we do our constructions, unless you're going really deep, which this particular site wouldn't be, we would only be using chipping and not blasting.
Mark, I noticed that you turned your camera on, so I wasn't sure if you had something to add to that discussion or not.
That's okay. I mean, I agree with what Brian has said. I mean, we've made every effort to reduce the amount of rock excavation. Maybe I could give Joanna a little comfort. If there was a decision to blast, the contractor is required to do what's called a pre-construction inspection. So they go around, they'll tell all the residents within a certain radius who they are, and they'll do a video inspection. They're basically documenting what your place looks like before, and they're focusing on things like foundation, windows, and that way if you do have a claim afterwards, they're able to come back and say, okay, you're right, something has occurred, or no, this was here beforehand. The other measures they take, they're required to keep what's called it's the vibration, basically. They're required to keep that below a certain threshold. And what they'll typically do is put monitors in certain locations. So it could even be, if you were willing, it could go in your basement, and it tracks when the blasts occur, and it makes sure that the vibrations are below the threshold that they're supposed to stick to. So I don't know, hopefully that helps and gives you a little comfort.
Thanks, Mark. Definitely helpful.
Yeah, perfect. That was great. And then I have Neville's questions here. These are the comments. So Neville's questions were, have any school boards commented yet? 1, 2, what is the breakdown of 1 and 2 bedroom units within the 103? And 3, where are pedestrians expected to cross Halton? Are you planning to erect a pedestrian crossing along Halton? Yeah, so those are the 3. Any school board comments yet? 1, 2, breakdown of the 1 and 2 bedroom units of the 103, and then pedestrian crossings along Halton.
Perfect. So in terms of the breakdown of the units, I mean, we're still going through the approval processes. So, this isn't cemented in place. But generally right now we're looking at 9 2-bedroom plus den, 59 2 bedrooms, and 35 1 bedrooms plus den. And Andrew, can you just remind me what the second question was?
Yeah, for sure. So have any school boards commented?
Right. So we haven't received comments back from staff yet. And when staff provides us comments, they also provide comments that from outside circulation agencies. So, you know, Hydro, Bell, the school boards, we typically get all of those comments at the same time. So we don't have those comments yet. And with regards to sort of pedestrian connectivity, Brad, I don't know if you want to sort of hop back on and comment on that, but generally we've provided, you know, a number of different pedestrian connectivity routes throughout the site, all leading directly to the sidewalk that's already on Halton Terrace. But are you, oh, you are unmuted. I didn't even have to do it. Perfect.
So yeah, we are planning to provide pedestrian connectivity to the existing sidewalks along Halton Terrace, which will allow them to pedestrians to go up to Marsh Road. To the west, I know as part of the Jack Donahue Public School or the traffic calming measures along Halton Terrace, there's a few pedestrian crossovers that are proposed kind of to the southwest. I know that those are a little bit further away, but I also wanted to mention that as part of the Kanata North urban expansion area lands, they're planning to bring a collector road that would kind of swoop down and tie into March Road at the existing Halton Terrace location. And at that point in time, Halton Terrace will tee into the ultimate collector road as part of the Kanata North lands, as well as Old Carp Road would tie into that collector road, and that would be the thoroughfare out to March Road. So at that point in time, there will be a pedestrian crossing through the stop-controlled intersection right at the northern corner of our site. So pedestrians would be able to exit the site and cross at the controlled crossing with the future roadway, and then cross and carry along their way.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, I think that's all of them. And then of those questions, and then anything in the chat, and I will go to Lucas. Oh, yeah, I'll just go straight to Lucas because it's your question in the chat as well.
I put in the chat, as what just mentioned a little bit ago, that the old Carp Road is going to be apparently widened in the future. What stretch of old Carp Road will be widened, and by how much is like 4 lanes from 2 lanes? And so that's what I understood, but maybe I misunderstood about that, if that's part of the city plan, because I didn't realize if there's really space for widening the old Carp Road. Why isn't there, just curiosity, why isn't there at least like a minimal amount of like 3-bedroom units included or being proposed in this new building? Because like how families potentially could be moving in, or like it's like a suburb, and it seemed like a great neighborhood with family friendly neighborhood. So what's the reason for not including at least a few 3-bedroom units in the building? Is gonna be like a property management plan for like the gardening and the watering of any like trees that are planted on this, so that they don't die from the heat of the summers and stuff, if there's not too much rain and stuff like that. So what is the parking ratio? I missed that, sorry, when that was mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
So I'll comment on a couple of the questions that you had raised, and then I'll sort of redirect. The parking is a 1-to-1 ratio for the resident parking, but there is 21 visitor parking spaces provided and 72 bicycle parking spaces provided. We're doing some 2-bedroom plus den units, but 3-bedroom units, when you consider the comparison of sort of, market rent, comparing a 3-bedroom in a apartment setting versus a 3-bedroom townhome, the rents are comparable such that most people that are looking for a 3-bedroom are typically not looking for a 3-bedroom in an apartment setting as often. And so they typically find a comparable rent for a townhome, and they often, navigate towards that type of rental. So that's sort of where, we made the decision to do the 2-bedroom plus den. And, for a family with sort of 1 kid, 2-bedroom plus den works really well. The den can be an office, parents in one room, kid in the other room, or as I was growing up, sometimes you end up in a bunk bed. But just in terms of those rent comparables, it is generally, it makes more sense to have the 2-bedroom options in an apartment building, and then 3 bedrooms in sort of more of the townhome type built form. And the other comment about the road widening, I'll direct to Brad. And then in terms of property management, Brian, I'll throw that your way after Brad's done.
Hi. So yeah, just to clarify, Old Carp Road, the city doesn't have plans to widen Old Carp Road at this point. I guess the intent is through the Kanata North urban expansion area lands that a new collector road to the property or to the lands to the north would require a new collector road to travel through and connect to the existing Halton Terrace and Marsh Road intersection. So that would effectively rebuild a new collector road going up into the Kanata North urban expansion area lands. And that would be a 2-lane road, probably parking on one side, and cycle tracks and sidewalks on both sides. And that would kind of be the thoroughfare going to the lands to the north. At that point in time, Old Carp Road will be kind of shortened and will be realigned to tie into the future collector road to the going to those lands. As well, Halton Terrace would be the teeing road, would be kind of the side street approach to that collector road, and the intent is for that road to convey traffic towards March Road and not have the traffic turn onto Old Carp Road or Halton Terrace. So that's the intent, I guess, with the roads to the north, but there is no actual plan to widen Old Carp Road itself.
Great.
I'm just gonna give Brian a chance to speak about the property management component of it.
Yeah, so absolutely, there would be on-site property management, and landscaping, and continual property maintenance as part of building maintenance and the upkeep of the building. So that's all part of the process of having the building. So 100% there'd be continually landscaped. Same with snow removal.
Yeah. Okay. This went very well. So I'll pass it over. Unless you have anything, Christine, you want to add up?
I mean, just want to reiterate that, if there are, follow-up questions or things that you think of afterwards, please, feel free to email Andrew or Councillor Curry and let them know, and they'll pass it along to us. And, the DevApps link is available. Andrew, I don't know if you posted that in the chat. For some reason, I can't see the general chat, but maybe just post the direct DevApps link so that they can skim through the material. There's a button that you can click to connect directly to Kieran Watson and send them an email. So
doing that as we speak. And until then, I will pass it to Councillor Curry, and I'll do that right now. Andrew,
I think Dave Van Dusen had another comment there. If you want to just go to him first.
Sure. There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know what next steps are, what that looks like, and when would one expect shovels to hit the ground, realistically?
Well, the shovels in the ground question is difficult to answer, but I'll do my best. Next steps are the applications are on circulation with the City of Ottawa. Hopefully we get comments within the next, 2-3 weeks, ideally before the end of the month. We'll get comments back from the city, comments related to our zoning and our official plan amendments. And they probably will hold back some detailed comments about the site plan because they would want us to move through the amendments that we're seeking first before we get into detailed site plan comments. But ideally we get those comments from staff. We respond to, whatever concerns or questions they have. And, following that back and forth period of review, a report gets prepared by city staff. That is the report recommendation that then goes to Planning and Housing Committee. That report would be available to the public online, I believe 10 days before the public meeting, and Andrew's shaking his head yes, so I got that timeline right. But while we're moving towards that goal of getting this before Planning and Housing Committee, we'll make sure to give, before that 10 days, we will try and give an update to Councillor Curry's office and let them know, please feel free to let the residents know that this item is likely to be heard on, this date, this agenda of Planning and Housing Committee, just so that people can be aware of when that is, because 10 days in the grand scheme of a busy life really isn't that much notice. And so we want to make sure that people are aware of, when it's going to be heard. The report isn't allowed to be shared before 10 days, so that can't be available. But we can certainly let people know when the item is expected to be heard on the agenda. And then following that, whatever decision is made by Planning and Housing Committee, it then goes to council. And once that process is done, there's a 20-day appeal period. Once that process is done, if no appeals have been received, then the application will move through the final stages of site plan review. And then, site plan, once all the review components are finalized, they get the approval. And then following the approval, you sort of go through the legalities of preparing the site plan agreement, and that sort of stuff falls into place. So, in an ideal world, let's say we go through all of those processes and we get site plan approval in September. Hopefully sooner. Obviously, Brian would love for things to move sooner, because obviously, the longer a process takes, there's, financial implications to that as well. And, housing is really needed. And so, the more we can shorten those review times, that would be helpful generally in the communities, but, and it also gives you a bit more certainty as well. So assuming things were, the approval processes were done by September, I believe Brian was saying the actual construction period would be about 18 months.
Perfect. Now over to Councillor Curry.
Okay, thank you for all of that. Obviously, thank you everybody for taking your night here to spend with us looking at this proposal. As Andrew put in the chat, first, Kieran is our planner. And his, Kieran Watson, so his email there is in the chat if you want to write to him directly about what your thoughts are after this meeting, which is kieran.watson@ottawa.ca. And then the DevApps link is in the chat as well. And now you can't see it, maybe Christine, but it is there. And then, you can always let us know if if somebody's now watching this as a recording, you can always email us at the Kanata North office, kathy.curry@ottawa.ca, and we'll send on to the planner for you. But I will say that, there's a lot going on in this area all at once. So if you're interested in this development, there's definitely more to come up March Road, and will continue to come all the way up March Road, almost to the Dunrobin Light, with the, future plan hopefully to widen March Road and get bus rapid transit up the center of March Road, which none of which has been finalized and none of which has any funding, but is critical to all of this. So any comments you have on anything, please send them to us. The other is that every comment that's made here, Andrew is also taking note of to send to our planners, and our planners will watch this recording. So thank you everybody for your evening here tonight, and we'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.